It was 2:30 p.m. over the South China Sea when one American helicopter did something so bold it sent shockwaves all the way to Beijing. Within minutes, China scrambled their deadliest attack helicopter to intercept, but here's the twist. What that Chinese pilot did next would turn into the single biggest mistake of his career. For the next 72 minutes, in a high-stakes game of intimidation against the most powerful navy on Earth, this lone Z-10 pilot would accidentally reveal something Beijing never wanted the Americans to discover. He had launched from Xiamen just 28 minutes earlier. His orders simple but dangerous: go scare them off. On the other side, the U.S. Navy's MH-60 Romeo, nicknamed the Swiss Army knife of helicopters, wasn't there to play games. It was locked onto a mission shadowing a Chinese Type 039 diesel submarine that had just surfaced. Now here's the problem with diesel subs: they're like a person holding their breath underwater. Sooner or later you have to come up for air. And when you finally do, America's eyes are already on you. Then came the warning, sharp and cold over the radio. Foreign military aircraft, you are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course immediately. But what happened next would push this standoff into dangerous, uncharted territory. The radio hissed, then snapped alive. Foreign military aircraft, alter course immediately. The Chinese Z-10 pilot yanked his stick, banking hard across the nose of the American MH-60 Romeo at just 500 meters. But here's the kicker: they weren't anywhere near Chinese territory. They were 50 nautical miles out, squarely in international airspace. Translation: the Americans were right where they belonged. Inside the Romeo, three calm professionals, two pilots and a sensor operator, didn't even blink. Why? Because they knew something the Chinese didn't. For the next 72 minutes, while Beijing thought it was flexing, it was actually handing the U.S. Navy a goldmine of intelligence. See those bumps and bulges on the Romeo's fuselage? Those aren't for decoration. They're an AL-U-210 electronic support pods, basically high-tech vacuum cleaners for signals. Every radar ping, every comms frequency, even the subtle hum of the Z-10's engine was being scooped up, stored and analyzed, all while the Chinese pilot thought he was putting on a show. And speaking of the Z-10, it's what you get when you order an Apache from Wish. Angular? Sure. Intimidating, maybe from a distance. But under the hood, it's a Frankenstein design patched together with Russian blueprints from the 1990s. It looks tough, but so does a Toyota Camry with a spoiler kit. Desperate, the Chinese pilot popped off two flares near the Romeo. Not an attack, just theater. The aerial equivalent of a chihuahua barking at a pit bull. The Americans' response? They lowered their dipping sonar, pointing it right at the submarine below. Message received: we still see your friend. And that friend, the diesel sub, panicked. It crash dived so fast the ocean itself tattled. Cavitation bubbles, hull creaks and pressure pops screamed across sonar networks of the entire carrier strike group. In sub-warfare, noise is death. That Z-10 pilot had just doomed his own submarine, if this were a real war. But he wasn't done making mistakes. Oh no. At 2:48 p.m., after 18 minutes of chest thumping, the Chinese pilot finally thought he'd won. His fire control radar locked onto the Romeo. He heard the warbling tone in his headset. Finally, a simulated kill. It lasted all of 3 seconds. Because the moment the Americans got bored, they flipped a switch. Out of nowhere, an EA-18 Growler lit up the sky, blasting the Z-10 with pure electromagnetic chaos. His radar display dissolved into static. His target didn't just vanish, it multiplied. Suddenly there weren't one, but a dozen American helicopters on his screen. Some were flying backwards. Some appeared to teleport. One even showed up inside his own cockpit. For the Chinese pilot, the message couldn't be clearer. Welcome to the world of American electronic warfare. This is what happens when 1990s Russian hand-me-downs run headfirst into 21st century American electronic warfare. The ALQ-99 jamming pods don't just block radar signals, they make them hallucinate. They're frequency agile, bouncing across the spectrum faster than Beijing's radar can even keep up. While the Z-10's pilot stared at one channel, the jamming had already leapt to 50 others. And then, it got worse. Suddenly his threat display lit up like Christmas morning. The entire U.S. carrier strike group had locked onto him with their spy radars. Imagine the eye of Sauron suddenly turning and saying, "Hey, I see you." On the carrier deck, F/A-18 Super Hornets were already warming up, not to fire, but to send a reminder this little Romeo helicopter wasn't alone. Behind it stood the entire Pacific Fleet. The Chinese pilot scrambled, switching frequencies, cranking up power, even trying the classic turn it off and on again. Nothing worked. The Romeo's electronic suite was everywhere. all at once, what specialists call full-spectrum dominance, what Chinese pilots call, oh no. Meanwhile, inside the Romeo, the American crew was so relaxed, they might as well have been debating lunch, because they knew in just 4 minutes, things were about to get really embarrassing for China. The Romeo dipped its sonar again, bang pointed straight at the submarine below. That poor diesel boat was flailing now, throwing itself into desperate zigzags. But every frantic turn only made more noise. And in submarine warfare, more noise is the same as drawing a giant neon sign that says, "Hit me." Then came the calm American transmission. Chinese military aircraft. This is the United States Navy, operating in international airspace in accordance with international law. We will maintain course and altitude. Translation, nice try kid. And every passing second, the US was harvesting pure intelligence gold. Encryption protocols that hadn't been updated since 2003. Radar frequencies still stuck in the era of flip phones. Even the harmonics of the Z-10's rotor blades, unique acoustic fingerprints that meant the Americans could now identify one of these choppers from 50 miles away, just by the sound it made. But Beijing's pilot wasn't finished embarrassing himself. Frustrated, he tried one last trick, closing in to just 500 meters. Bad move. At that range, he could clearly see the Romeo's door gunner, casually manning a GAU 21.50 caliber machine gun. Not pointing at him. Not yet. But the message, crystal clear. And now, the real mismatch was about to reveal itself. Frustrated, the Chinese pilot switched to brute force. The Z-10 began thrashing in the sky, lunges left, sudden pitches up, violent dives down. It looked like a boxer throwing wild feints, desperate to land a hit. But here's the problem. Every sharp turn bled away his airspeed and pushed the Z-10's fragile airframe to the brink. The Romeo, built on the legendary Black Hawk platform, could handle higher G-loads with ease. So while Beijing's pilot was sweating bullets, the Americans were just watching. Self-destruction, step by step. Meanwhile, the sensor war was laughably one-sided. The Romeo's NAAR-47 missile warning system tracked every twitch of the Z-10. Maximum turn rate, 20 degrees per second. Climb performance, 12 meters per second. This wasn't just intel. It was a manual. American engineers would later use this data to literally program their missiles on how to kill the Z-10. The Romeo's FLIR camera was recording everything in crisp 1080p infrared. Exhaust ports glowing at 450 degrees Celsius. Transmission housing at 180 degrees Celsius. Each heat signature marked as a future bullseye for heat-seeking weapons. The Chinese pilot thought he was intimidating. In reality, he was filming a tutorial on how to destroy his own helicopter. And if he thought his own weapons would tip the balance, think again. The Z-10's 23mm cannon, effective maybe 2,500 meters, against a stationary target. Against a maneuvering Romeo, lucky to scratch paint at 500 meters. The Romeo's GAU-21, on the other hand, could shred him from nearly 2,000 meters away, using armor-piercing incendiary rounds that would treat his airframe like wet tissue paper. And considering Chinese build quality, well, let's just say tissue paper is being generous. By now, the Z-10's cockpit looked like a Christmas tree of warning lights. The controls went soft. The airframe groaned under stress, but retreat meant a court-martial. So the pilot silenced the alarms and pushed harder. He tried radar locks 14 times. Each attempt was logged by the Romeo, a perfect record of every frequency hop and pulse pattern. It was like watching someone repeatedly enter the wrong password while you write each one down. Then came his last card, laser designation. The Romeo detected it instantly, and worse for Beijing, identified the exact model and software version. That single mistake meant America now knew how to jam not just this helicopter, but every Chinese system using the same tech. One pilot, one helicopter, one encounter, an entire generation of Chinese weapons compromised. The Z-10's engines were now screaming at 105% power, burning so hot the infrared bloom was 40% brighter than normal. The Romeo's cameras documented it all. Future missiles would use that glow as a tracking beacon. Comms weren't safe either. Every word between the pilot and ground control was intercepted, their secure frequency hopping revealed as predictable and vulnerable. With that, the US gained the ability to jam Chinese military comms across the entire region. By the time 3:42 p.m. rolled around, the Z-10 was falling apart, hydraulic pressure dropping, transmission temperature redlining, controls sluggish, and when the Romeo dipped its sonar yet again, the sub below was still lit up on American screens. 72 minutes. That's how long the Chinese pilot flailed, sweated and failed. He hadn't moved the Americans an inch. He didn't even need to report his humiliation. Beijing's ground controllers were watching the same radar picture. They knew. Meanwhile, the US walked away with a treasure chest of intelligence. Exactly which frequencies to jam, exactly where to aim missiles, exactly how to outmaneuver the Z-10. One helicopter encounter handed America the blueprint to dismantle China's attack helicopter fleet. The message couldn't be clearer: stick to making knockoff iPhones. Bye for now. If you enjoyed this story of how one helicopter encounter exposed an entire generation of Chinese weapons, make sure to hit that like button. And if you want more raw, unfiltered stories the history books don't tell, subscribe and turn on the bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.